Okay, remember that they are changing my voice. In regards to the discussion with the Jehovah's Witness, who had been studying the Bible for a long time, and the other person who came up, who was some kind of Protestant, from what I gather, an occultist, it is clear to me that I'm correct. Let's look at Matthew 5, in the section called the fulfillment of the law. It says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." So what then happens, right? Heaven and earth disappear. So as they interpret the Garden of Eden to be literal, okay, and for mankind to be cut off from the garden, they must also then, logically, right, interpret the disappearing of the earth to be literal. Now, if they were to argue, well, that they don't believe that that's literal, but they believe the Garden of Eden is literal, and they believe that heaven coming down to earth, right, that Christ coming back and the tribulation occurring and so on and so forth occurs in a manner that they believe magically includes the earth being made the new place for the righteous, okay? You see how there's different ways that one might think that they can interpret this, but there's only one true interpretation, because you have to do the situation justice, okay? We see that in the Bible it says that unless your righteousness, in verse 20, Matthew 5 verse 20 says, "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." And in order to do so, you have to be righteous enough to understand that what is fair and just and right is for heaven and earth to disappear, okay, from the righteous, right? Heaven and earth disappear in terms of the heaven that people perceive there to be. So, for example, in Psalm 19, they look into the sky. It says, "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands," right? So these things, due to pollution, due to the rotting of the universe, if you will, the physical universe, they disappear, okay? The righteous are taken somewhere else and they disappear. We see that in Isaiah, where it talks about Ariel. Somewhere around Isaiah chapter 30 or so, it says that it will be like a dream. And all those wicked people who are giving you a hard time will vanish. They will vanish. Why? Because the righteous will be taken somewhere else. Like it says in Isaiah 57, the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. So let me just read this section for you. Then we'll go to Matthew 6, and we'll go to the parable of the wise and foolish builders, I believe in Matthew 7. And you'll see that I must be right. "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices," keyword, practices, "and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." So we'll get to the reason I emphasize the word practices shortly. First, let's go to Matthew 6. This part is very key. So some of you might still not believe me. After this, you should believe me. Matthew 6, the section titled Treasures in Heaven, verse 19. "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where moths and vermin do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Now, if they didn't say that last verse, you might argue, well, magically, heaven magically comes to earth, and everyone is here, and God's with them, and Christ is with them, and everyone's happy, right? But the problem is the Lord weighs the heart. And the heart must be with God in heaven. Okay, you see in John 17, okay, the followers of Christ in Christ and Christ in the Father. So therefore, the followers with the Father in heaven, and in a place that's made in heaven for them to be, where the Son is ruling right there with their souls. We'll get to that. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. You will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. So what has really made this nation, this planet the way it is? Money has changed it. And there's a bunch of people with technology who seek to trick the inhabitants of the earth using their flesh with their technology. So their argument is that you should magically, mind you, trust the churches, right? And magically follow them. Say this so that it's harder for them to take me out of context. I say it that way. That is, for that reason. Okay? And that ignore the technology, and if you feel like the tribulation has occurred already, they want you to just put your faith in man, that it's really Christ you're feeling and not being hooked to a machine remotely at a time when the pinnacle of mind control occurs. So why would God want heaven to come to earth when you could be tricked by supercomputers and think that heaven is here on earth? Okay? God is not the author of disorder, but of peace. Furthermore, your heart should be with God in heaven, not on this planet. Your heart shouldn't be with this planet. Okay? It goes as far as to say, do not store up for yourselves treasure on earth. Do not prepare to live on earth forever. Don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Also, Christ has said, my kingdom is not of this world. So if his kingdom is not of this world in the first place, and heaven and earth pass away, and there's a new heaven and a new earth, why would it be here? There's nothing in the Bible that says that the new earth needs to be here. So why would eternal paradise be limited to this planet? The people who believe that worship the earth, right? Logic would tell you. Like the Romans did. The G in Freemasonry. Also known as Gaia, Gay-IA. And there's a bunch of white, Jew, and LGBT people and token minorities who are in the tech sector, who have access to various technologies, and they worship the earth. So they interpret it in the way that Satan does. It says Satan, who is the god of this world, right, has blinded people and so on and so forth and led them astray. Now, some people would argue that Satan gets defeated and this earth gets reclaimed. But they're wrong. We see in Isaiah 24, which I cited during the discussion, it says the earth sinks never to rise again. Key phrase, never to rise again. So when we look at this thing and we try to use a sound scale, we see that there's a bunch of people who are trying to fool people into thinking that they're in heaven on earth when they're not, and they have technology. We see B, that the prophets were screened out, right? The earth is defiled. So heavy is it on it, is the guilt of its rebellion that it sinks never to rise again. We see that C, things are being made anew. Should God refresh this planet where women rejected Christ, where people were abused, children were defiled, women were raped, all these wars were fought? Should we be like some kind of conservative and say we want to stay here forever, no matter what, guys? Or should we look at the situation and say, God can do better than this? This is nothing. There's a lot of problems with this planet. I don't want to go into detail, but some of them are grimy details. Think about your dog. If this place is a holy place, and you're taking your dog for a walk, and he takes a crap in the park. In fact, the word park is a play on words for crap. And Baal, who is like the main candidate for Satan's main form, his Egyptian equivalent is Set, who's a play on words for shit. Excuse my French. Okay, this earth is a place where it rains. The rain is partially urine. There's animals that go to the bathroom on it all the time. Is this a holy place to live forever? No. Now let's look at it with the most damning evidence of all, which is in Matthew 7. The most damning evidence. I'm certain that those of you who are on the fence will change your mind. Those of you who are insane and in cults or something, you might not change your mind. But those of you who have sense will change your mind when we get into the parable of the wise and foolish builders. Who, what, when, where, how, why? Who, what, when, where, how, why? Where? How, why? Who, what, when, where, how, why? Okay, so in Matthew 7, let me just really quickly go through verse 21. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Now, elsewhere in the Bible, it says that the kingdom of heaven is upon you. Okay? The kingdom of heaven was upon them, and it was with Christ's soul in the spiritual realm. And so while he was on earth, the kingdom of heaven was elsewhere, not in the physical plane of earth. The essence of the earth, the essence of the idea of earth, but in a perfected form, without animals defiling it. And people haven't done horrible things on it. A place that cannot be touched by wickedness. Remember, Satan rebelled. That's why it says heaven and earth pass away, but my words will never pass away, because Satan is said to have defiled heaven by having been in there and been thrown out. A new heaven is created. So it says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven, who does the will. So what is God's will? God's will includes making the distinction between living on this planet and living in paradise. You have to have the wisdom to make that distinction. The wise and foolish builders, Matthew 7 verse 24. Therefore, okay, let me just read up the, we're right there with the scriptures anyway, so let's just go to verse 22. We'll get to 24 real fast. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and in your name perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Then I will tell you plainly. Plainly. Then it goes on to the parable of the wise and foolish builders to help them make the distinction between people who are mistaken, like people who think that heaven will come to this physical earth, and that Jesus will rule here on this earth instead of take the righteous away, gather them up in the clouds of his martial arts spirit, and take them elsewhere. Like it says in Paul's letters. So again, then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. The wise and foolish builders. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. He built his house where? On the rock. Store treasures where? In heaven. Why? Because they're with God. And God looks after them. And God values that location. God values it in a certain way, we'll say. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he had taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. So this is part of why they changed my voice and they fume and poison me. But nonetheless, people are amazed to see that as everyone else is walking the broad path to destruction, and that includes those people. Notice there was two of them. The other guy came out of seemingly nowhere. Either they were both working for the state, or that guy happened to overhear. What are the odds? Because he's on the broad path to destruction, just like the Jehovah's Witness. No offense to anybody. And so he agreed with that guy. So there was one person who said that heaven is, that the righteous are going to live with Jesus elsewhere. And there was two people that agreed that it was going to actually be here on this planet. So who's from which path? who is practicing the narrow path that is unpopular, and who is from a group that, has quite a few members that pretends they're on the narrow path. And then there's a bunch of other churches with similar arguments. When you add them all up, there's quite a few of them. They're like Gog and Magog. They're like the grains of sand on the beach. Again, no offense to anybody, other than the offense that God intended. Okay. So he said that the wise people built with their foundation on the rock. And the foundation of God's throne, God is the rock, the essence of the rock. The foundation of his throne, it says in Psalm 89, is righteousness and justice. So to do the idea of justice, as we compare the models, you say, how should we interpret this? Is it saying that heaven comes here to earth, or is it saying that, the earth and the heavens pass away to the righteous? They're no longer here standing on earth looking up at the sun and the sky and seeing as such. They're somewhere else. And they pass away for that reason. Like it says in Isaiah, right? All those wicked people that gave him a hard time, all those attractive women that shunned him for wicked guys and wore sexually promiscuous clothes, sexually suggestive and provocative clothing, provoking them, insulting them, teasing them. The word "set" is a play on words for tease. They're all gone. And they're all going to where they deserve. And everyone knows life on this planet, for the vast majority of people, everyone with any speck of sanity or more, is quite difficult. This planet is a symbol of difficult living for human beings. The Garden of Eden was not a physical place on this planet. Just like when Christ said, the kingdom of heaven is upon you. He was the gate into the kingdom of heaven. I am the gate. I am Christ. And the cherubim is said to be the gate into the Garden of Eden. Okay. Matthew 8:11 is also an interesting scripture. I want to end by saying this. There's a lot of people who don't want to admit this. They hear my argument, where I talk to the Jews and say, look, first of all, you are not the same as the Jews in the Bible, because they were broken down into tribes. They knew their tribe. None of you know your tribes. You kind of make it up as you go along, or have it in a occult scale. Secondly, it says the kingdom of heaven will be taken away from you. Thirdly, in Galatians 3:28 it says there's no Jew or Gentile. Fourthly, in Galatians 4 it says Jerusalem in the heavens is right with God, not Jerusalem on this earth. And a lot of Jewish ladies and gentlemen from the Orthodox persuasion, they argue that Israel is an invalid state. Now, are they the only ones who are invalid? The oldest trick in the book is to point to somebody who's obviously invalid and pretend that you magically aren't. So the next point is Matthew 8:11. It says, I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So who are the subjects? You all know this. He's talking about the people that made a covenant with God, and God said to them through Moses and the prophets, said, if you break this covenant, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, if you don't practice moral precision, that you will be punished to the extreme. Christ is a character in the story, came and said, the one who knows better, like the people who have had a covenant for quite some time, from generations of stories that tell them better. Generations of Pharisees and Sadducees who, in their pride, they argued that they knew best and that they should magically be in charge. They were said to be the subjects of the kingdom of heaven in the story. He said the kingdom of heaven will be taken away from you and given to a people who perform it will produce its fruit, will do its deeds. He says they will be thrown outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now why? Because they didn't obey God. Commandments, the 10 commandments. You think they're there so that for them to do whatever they want? Said, thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not cheat the top martial arts ever possible. Thou shalt not work with the Gentile and get women to shun them. What have you? They broke the 10 commandments. And Moses, when he came down from the mountain, what did he see? He saw them breaking the 10 commandments already. And so he broke the 2 tablets. He broke them. At a point in the Bible, he tells the Levites to start laying them out like ducks. He told them to kill them, like the law says to stone the sinners. Does that indicate that they have a covenant that cannot be broken no matter what? Or is it symbolic that it can be broken and they can lose the kingdom, and as individuals and as groups they can be executed for treason against God? Now again, this is not hate speech. This is the obvious interpretation of the story. King Solomon and the 2 women, they stand for 2 nations. Now think of it as 2 kings instead of 2 nations or 2 women. One of them is the top martial artist ever, who has established the throne in righteousness, who says to the Jews and Gentiles and to the whole world, I believe it is Proverbs 17:2, that a prudent servant will rule over a disgraceful son and share the inheritance of one of the family. Whether or not you see me as the spiritual lineage, as being from the spiritual lineage of Judah, or you see me as a Gentile, either way I have outmaneuvered you while you were all in rebellion. You have not treated me fairly as individuals or as groups. And in my diligence, my prudence, I have outperformed you. And now you are like Cain, whether you're Jew or Gentile, whether you're Catholic or Protestant, Muslim, Jew, whatever you are. You are like Cain and you're bitter that I'm the top martial artist and it's not you. Putting all your heads together. It's not you. You relied on flesh. You did so for generations. You saw the Igbo tribe producing more than you, and you sought to cover it up as groups. And those individuals were unaware. You made formations when the wicked, instead of seeing that wickedness in them and rejecting them as husbands, rejecting them as wives. Those who obey the commandments of God are my family. That's what you should have said, but you didn't. Instead, you identified as your flesh. And you had disdain for God in your heart. A person's own folly leads to their ruin, but their heart rages against the Lord. Folly is in the heart of a child. The rod of discipline will drive it far away. Folly is an unruly woman. So you have the hearts of children, baby line, Rothschild, child. You have the hearts of children. The hearts of unruly women instead of men manning up. And women only dating men who man up. And your hearts, your childish, unruly, female dog hearts are raging against God Almighty. While I, through righteousness, am the top martial artist ever possible. So I say to you, who the heck do you think is anointed? Who should you follow? So I think that by now you should understand the determinant in my argument is that I've established the throne in righteousness, and irrefutably so. And therefore my interpretation of the Bible is greater than all the authors of the Bible's intentions put together. Do you worship whatever scribes happen to write the Bible? Be they the people who the books are named after or not? Or are you the worshipers of the most righteous person ever possible? Because righteousness is greater than wealth. Righteousness is greater than a confusing book, even if that book is the Bible and you're very attached to it. If God said, I want you to choose between following your churches and the Bible with all these contradictory interpretations and translations and groups, and choosing to follow the most righteous person that ever lived, what do you think you should choose? And when they move against me and play stupid and fume me and poison me instead of debating me, they have screamed with all their being that I am in charge, and they are mere fucking rebels.